So we are going to start this morning off with just kind of a little fun thing that I wanted to do. So what's going to happen is I'm going to show you two different pictures, and I want you to try to guess what's happening in the picture. So here's the first one. Go ahead and take a look at that one. All right. So can you guys guess what's happening? And what do you think is happening in that picture? What do you guys think? Go ahead and throw out some suggestions. What do you guys think is happening in that picture? They're watching something. Okay. What's that? Flying saucers. Okay. Baseball game. Football game. What was that? Kiss cam. Oh, I won't say anything on that one. But there are no CEOs here today, right? Okay. All right. Um, so what's happening is actually they're all watching a jumbotron, and it is a bicycle race that they are watching. So obviously that's not America. So all right, let's look at the next one. All right, so what do you guys think is happening there? What's that? She's what? Burning Man? Oh, okay. I've never heard of Burning Man before. Okay. All right. So is that like Woodstock? Is that kind of like Woodstock? Is that what? Okay. Any selfie? Okay. Any other thoughts? Latte commercial. Nice. Eyeglass commercial. Okay. Any others? All right. So she's actually dancing around in a circle with her friends. Is what's happening in that one. So it could have been Burning Man. Okay. Or Woodstock. We'll just go with that. Woodstock. All right. With that, but here's the point behind all these pictures that we just shared is behind them there's a story. Behind them there's a story. And we're going to get to that in a second, but I want us to kind of keep that in mind, but we are going to circle back to that. But right now, we're in the middle of a series that we've been doing called What is Love? We're doing a series called What is Love? And so in this series, what we've been doing is we've been looking at what does it mean to love God? Because in the scriptures, that's the greatest commandment that he gives us, right? Love him, love others. Love him with all that we have and love others. So again, the question becomes, well, then if we are called to do that, then what does that look like? And how do we know that we're doing it? And so that's kind of been the goal of this series. So with that in mind, there is a passage that we've been looking at for the last few weeks, and that is Mark chapter 12, verse 30. And it says this, it says, and you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all of your strength. So based upon what we've been examining over the last few weeks, what I did is I've kind of created an expanding definition of what that means. And so you can kind of see that right on the screen. So loving God is a living, growing, and dynamic journey enriched and empowered by him as we make our home in him and look to him as our sole source for meeting our deepest needs for identity, value, and purpose. Expanded by utilizing our critical thinking and reasoning, adjusting the way that we process life, using our imagination to dream with God, and moving God to the front of our plans rather than an afterthought. This is best achieved by daily positioning our lives to maximize the presence of God in us. So, in other words, why is it? Why is it so important for us to love him? Why is it so important for us to love him? Like why did Jesus start there? Because Jesus could have just said, love your neighbors yourself. But he started with loving God. And then I think one of the greatest reasons why is, and I'm going to hit this several times over the course of this message. So by the end, hopefully that will be clear. But ultimately, the way that we love is a response to what it is that God has done. And so the more time that we spend with him, the more time that we invest in our relationship with him, the more that we're able to see how much he loves us unconditionally, forgives us unconditionally, accepts us unconditionally, the more that we're able to recognize that, the more that we're able to recognize in our relationship with him that he assigns us value and worth, and there's nothing that we have to do to earn it, that he automatically gives that to us because of his willingness to go to the cross and sacrifice. The more that we invest in that love, the more that love begins to fill us. And then as a result of that, it's gotten to the point where, when you are so filled, have you ever been to that point where you are so filled with something that you just kind of have to like explode, or like it just has to come out? I'll give you an example of that. When someone tells a really great joke, not like the one in the announcements, but when someone tells I like a really good, and I don't know about you, but there have been times when somebody says a joke and I go, ha, kind of thing, because it's so good, it just has to, it just comes out. Um, and so that's kind of like the idea of this love, that we are so overflowed by it. We're so filled by it that it just flows out. And that flow begins to flow into the lives of those that are around us. And so this is why Jesus wanted us to spend time with that. So in Mark chapter 12, verse 31, now he follows it up. And he says this in Mark 12:31. The second is equally important. Love your as yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. No other commandment is greater than these. So what happens is when we look at Mark chapter 30, what Jesus does is he quotes what's called the Shema. And we find that in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 4 and 5. So now what Jesus does, he's actually quoting another passage in the first 5 books of the Bible called the Torah. He's quoting another passage in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 18. You can see that right on the screen as well. It says, do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against a fellow Israelite, but love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. I am the Lord. So as you look at this, again, there's this quote. But here's the thing that's really interesting is when you look into it and you begin to see that there's a Hebrew word for love your neighbor, and then there's a Greek word for love your neighbor. Now, what's interesting is Jesus does not use the equivalent Greek word for love your neighbor that is used in Leviticus. So the equivalent Greek word for love your neighbor that Jesus would have used that's in Leviticus would be phileo, which is like a brotherly love. Like the city of love is Philadelphia, right? So brotherly love. So that's kind of equivalent of the word that is used in Leviticus. So what Jesus kind of does is he raises a standard. And the love that he uses to describe loving your neighbor is the same word for love, agapao, that same word for love that is used for describing our relationship with God is the same type of love for loving your neighbor. See, the one in Leviticus is kind of like have an affection for. And we do that, right? We love those that we like. We like those that we like. But this is more than just feeling an affection for. It is a love that is birthed out of sacrifice. It is a love that is birthed out of being unconditional. It's a love that is birthed out of I love you, whether I like you or not, that I'm going to love you and pour myself out to you. So he's raising the bar of that love, and ultimately what that love looks like, what that love is challenging us to do in our relationship with him. So as we're looking at that, so as we're looking at that and we're looking at the challenge that Jesus gives us, it's vital that we begin to understand. So why go back? So again, let's go back to understanding that love. As we understand the love that God has for us. And I want you to really understand how incredible this love is. So there's this one point where this guy named Simon, not Simon Peter, this is a different Simon. This is a Simon that's a Pharisee. And remember, the Pharisees were the religious leaders of Jesus' time that Jesus always had like the headbutts with and that kind of thing. But one of them invites Jesus over to his house to kind of hang out and talk. And so Jesus shows up, he's there, and he goes, he sits at the table, and while he's at this table, this woman walks in. And this woman walks in, and she gets on her knees and before Jesus, and remember, back at that time, they didn't have chairs like we have when we sit at the dining table. They recline. So Jesus is in a reclining position, and so she comes over to his feet, and she begins to pour expensive perfume on his feet. And she also begins to cry. And as she's crying and pouring this perfume, she's also wiping his feet with her hair. And so Simon, the Pharisee, sees this, and he is offended by it, completely offended by it. First of all, he's offended, because let's just say the best way to describe this woman is a woman of ill repute. So it's not the kind of woman that would just show up at a Pharisee's house kind of thing. And so he is offended. First of all, that she walk in his house, but also he's offended because now she's doing it. She's anointing the feet of his guest, and also he thinks this. He thinks, huh? If he knew, if he really is the Messiah, he would know the kind of woman that is touching his feet, and he would not permit it. That's what Simon's thinking, because that's how they thought. And so, of course, Jesus picks this up, and then what happens is Jesus tells a story. And in the story, he says to Simon, hey, there are two people, there are two debtors, and they have this debt that they have to pay. And one person owes 10 times more than the other. And both debtors are forgiven by the person that they owe a debt to. And he says, which one do you think would love the person who forgives the debt more? And of course, Simon goes, well, obviously the one who owes him more. And then this is what Jesus says in Luke chapter 7, verses 44 through 48. It says, then he turned to the woman and said to Simon, look at this woman kneeling here. When I entered your home, you didn't offer me water to wash the dust off my feet. Now, realize this is just a courtesy. Like for example, if somebody shows up at your house, right? You might say something like, hey, are you thirsty? Can I give you some water? Or are you hungry? Can I get you something to eat? Like there are just certain things that you do being courteous to someone who enters your home. And so it was a custom back then. If somebody entered your home, their feet were dirty, so you would give them water to wipe the dust. He says, when I walked in, you didn't even offer me water. You didn't even offer me that common courtesy. But she has washed them with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You didn't greet me with a kiss, which is normal. People they kiss you on the other cheek, that kind of thing. But from the time I first came in, she has not stopped kissing my feet. You neglected the courtesy of olive oil to anoint my head, but she has anointed my feet with a rare perfume. I tell you, her sins, and they are many. So literally, Jesus says, I know who this woman is. I tell you, her sins, and they are many, have been forgiven. Not will be forgiven, not can be forgiven, have been forgiven. It's a done deal. So she has shown me much love. But a person who is forgiven little shows only a little love. Then Jesus said to the woman, your sins are forgiven. There's something about being at the feet of Jesus and just recognizing how much Jesus loves us. Sometimes there's a certain love in your life you can kind of take for granted. Don't we do that sometimes? Like I think about my mom and how many times in my life I kind of took her for granted. I took her love for granted, right? Until I went away to college, and then I had to wash my own clothes. Then I began to realize like how much my mom. Now, the good thing is my mom also taught me, like, and her philosophy was, you're going to learn how to wash your clothes. Because someday you're going to grow up, and I'm not going to have a son who's dependent upon his wife. You're going to wash your clothes, and you're going to be able to wash her clothes too. That's kind of her mindset as well. But there are certain things. Or how about this? Maybe, you're used to coming home for Thanksgiving, but now what happens is you're stuck at school for Thanksgiving. And then you sit down and you eat like the school Thanksgiving food, and you take one bite, and it is nothing like mom's Thanksgiving food. Nothing like mom's, right? Because no one can cook quite like, well, let me change that. There's nothing like my mom's Thanksgiving food. Because maybe you did have a mom that can't cook. You're like, Ken, you just don't know. So let me tell you, there's no one like my mom. So there's no one that can make sweet potatoes like my mom. No one. So, so there are things that you can do that you kind of take for granted, but you begin to go and you look back and you look at your mom and you look at your dad, and hopefully you've had the kind of relationship with them where you're able to see like how much they've given for you, how much they've sacrificed for you, how much they've offered, and you begin to see how much they love you. And there's something about when you have that opportunity to be able to spend time with Jesus. And as you're spending time at the feet of Jesus, you're able to recognize how much he loves you. How much he loves you. And the love that Jesus offers to you, again, is so foreign compared to the love that this world offers to us. It's completely foreign. And what I mean by that is a lot of times the love that the world offers to us, and maybe that could be your friends, it could be your family members, it could be those that are around you. A lot of times that love is conditional, isn't it? It's conditional. I'll love you if, I'll love you when, or I'll love you because. But for Jesus, for him, his love is utterly unconditional. And the more that you expose yourself to the cross and you expose yourself to his love, and you begin to look at yourself and you begin to realize the struggles in your life, the setbacks in your life, the failures of your life, the sins of your life, the more that you begin to realize, like, I do not deserve this love. But yet he pours it out on me anyway. He pours it out on me anyway. And the beautiful thing about that is he will also say to you, well, the love that I pour out to you is not about deserving. I love you because I've chosen you. I love you because I've chosen you. We make it about deserving. We make it about having the right to earn. He just automatically offers that love. And so again, it really is so foreign to what it is that we experience in our lives as well. There's a guy named Paul, and Paul is talking about ministering and serving, and he's talking about why he refuses to take pay for doing so. And he says this in 1 Corinthians, chapter 9, verse 16. It says, yet preaching the good news is not something I can boast about. I am compelled by God to do it. How terrible for me if I didn't preach the good news. And what happens is when you experience something so good, you are compelled to do it. It's almost like, you go out to that restaurant and you eat and you bite of that food and you are compelled to take photos and post it, right? Because you want to put the good news out there, and you might even add the link for the location so people can find the food or whatever it might be. There are certain elements that you just feel compelled. And so that's what Paul is saying, like, I've experienced this love and realize here's a guy that initially was arresting Christians and was responsible for the death of Christians. And now he has this incredible experience with Jesus. He sees this incredible love that is offered to him. Again, someone who completely and utterly feels like he doesn't deserve it. But again, Jesus pours this out. And then as a result, what happens is, and this is the reality, the more that we pour ourselves into that love and the more that we allow that love to be poured into us, the more we feel like, man, I want everybody to experience this love. I want everybody to experience it. And so that's what Paul is talking about here, and that's what my prayer is for us. And so today we're looking at this idea of loving your neighbor. And so there's a story that Jesus tells. And again, if you've heard me preach about this story before, you've heard me say this, and if I preach about this story again, I'm most likely going to say it again. But one of the cool things about the Bible is originally when the Bible was written, there weren't chapters and verses and that kind of thing. So that was kind of added in later. And then to help with its readability, to help with that, sometimes what people would do is they would put headings in. So you can kind of say, oh, okay, so this block is going to be about this, or this block is going to be about that. So to kind of help us to be able to recognize that. And there's a heading that is given on the passage that we're going to talk about. And that heading is called the Good Samaritan. The Good Samaritan. And I have always wrestled with this. And I think the reason why is because when I go back, and this is the way that I interpret the intention of Jesus, is as I'm looking at this passage, I think what Jesus wanted to do is just show that this guy was an ordinary guy just like anyone else, but extends this incredible amount of love. Sometimes we see things like the Good Samaritan, and we'll say things like, and we'll think like there's something special about him to show that kind of love. There's something unique about him that shows that kind of love. There's something unexpected about him that shows that kind of love. But when you look at what Jesus is doing in this story, because what happens is Jesus, on a different occasion in Matthew, Jesus is having a conversation. And so this person asks him, they say to Jesus, what's the greatest commandment? And Jesus says, well, you read the scripture, you tell me. And the guy responds back, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. And then the passage says, well, the guy wanted to justify who he was. And so he said, who is my neighbor? And that's when Jesus begins to tell this story. And I think Jesus wanted it to be like, here's an ordinary guy that showed this incredible love. And the reality is, any one of us can be that person that shows that incredible love. You know that one of the things, if anyone who knows me, you'll notice I never, ever insist on you calling me Pastor Ken. Never. Never insist on it. Because I've always felt like sometimes, the pastor comes in and the pastor comes in, right? And as a result, I talk differently because the pastor comes in. And the pastor is holier because he's in. And I'll tell you, like, as a kid, I used to hate when the pastor came to my house. I did. And I'll tell you the major reason why. Because I remember once I would go to grab a piece of chicken and be like, that's for the pastor. I'm like, that's the best piece. The pastor always got the best piece of chicken. That's irritating me. But no, another reason why is because I never want to be put on a pedestal. Never want to be. And for me, let me tell you, pastoring is what I do, but it's not who I am. It's not how I don't get my identity off of being a pastor. And also, I want you guys to know, I'm just like you. I'm on this journey just like you. I'm serving just like you. I'm loving just like you. Any of you are capable of doing what it is that I am doing. Any of you are capable of it. So that's one of the reasons why now, pastoring is just my full-time job, right? And I love what it is that I do. I love the opportunity of being able to invest in people and make a difference in their lives. But the reality is, every single one of you can do it as well. You can show his love, his compassion, his mercy. You can make a difference in your community. I want to encourage you to make a commitment to do that. And do that. Also in telling the story of the Samaritan, I'll just go that way, of telling the Samaritan, here's what Jesus also was hinting at. Because as we look at the story, one of the things that is important for us to understand is I want to give you a little bit of background so you can understand why this story is so significant. So back in Israel's history, there was one point where Israel as a nation divided. And so there was the northern kingdom and there was a southern kingdom. So the northern kingdom was Israel and the southern kingdom was Judah. And so then there's this group of people called the Assyrians. And so the Assyrians came in and they actually captured the northern kingdom. And what the people in the northern kingdom did was they assimilated. And when they assimilated with the Assyrian people, they really assimilated with the Assyrian people. And so as a result, they started having children with the Assyrians, and that's the group that became known as the Samaritans. And then we had the southern kingdom, which was Judah, and then eventually there's a group called the Babylonians. They come in, and they actually captured Judah as well. But the people of Judah, they never compromised in that sense. They never assimilate to the level that the northern kingdom did. And so as a result, the southern kingdom, the Jews from the southern kingdom, saw themselves as, well, we didn't compromise. So they kind of saw themselves as better than the people from the. So there became like this, almost like this hatred and this rivalry between the two. So I want to give you a picture, maybe of what that rivalry may have been like. So let's say, for example, Jesus is talking to a group of Black Panthers, and he says to the Black Panthers, hey, let me tell you about the story from the guy that's in the KKK that shows his love. Or maybe the reverse. That's how much hatred was between those two. So for Jesus to use this as an example really is saying that this is like a hated enemy that does this incredible love that we are about to see. So kind of keep that in mind as we're going through and we're walking through this passage as well. So with that, what Jesus says is in Luke chapter 10, verse 30, Jesus replied with the story. So again, remember the guy said, well, who is my neighbor? He says, well, Jesus replied with the story. A Jewish man was traveling from Jerusalem down to Jericho, and he was attacked by bandits. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him up, and left him half dead beside the road. So as we look at this, I really want you to get a picture. When it says going from Jerusalem down to Jericho, like it is literally down to Jericho. To go from Jerusalem to Jericho is like a 3,000 to 4,000 foot descent, and it's treacherous. It's not an easy path to go down. It's about 18 miles long, and for us now, 18 miles doesn't really seem like a big deal. I mean, we can hop in a car, drive 18 miles, sometimes in like 20 minutes. Well, unless it's Monday. Then it's a whole different thing. But for them, it was a significant travel. And so this guy is going down, and so this road was actually, it was dry, it was barren, but it was also treacherous. It was a risk to travel down this road. And I think it's also important for us to understand that as we're looking at this, there's a principle that we can pull out of this as well. And I want us to understand that this is really significant, important for us to understand. This world is treacherous. It is. This world is treacherous. It's hard. It's a battle. It's a struggle. This world will beat you down. This world will promise you things, and many of us have fallen for that, right? If you get an education, if you earn a certain amount of money, if you achieve this, if you have this, the world promises us that, and then we get that, and then we're what? Disappointed because it never follows through. It never fulfills what it promises. And that's if life is good. It never fulfills what it promises. But sometimes for many people, the world isn't good. It's difficult, it's hard, it's impossible. If you've had struggle with parents and there's been abuse in that way, if you've had spousal abuse, I mean, we can just go through the list of the ways that the world is difficult, it's treacherous, and it's hard. And I want us to understand that because the reality is there are tons of broken people in this world. And not just broken people in this world, there are tons of broken people in your office. There are tons of broken people in your school. There are tons of broken people in your neighborhood. There are broken people living right next door to you because of how treacherous, how hard, how difficult this world is. So it's important for us to begin to recognize that every time someone steps out the door, there's a risk. There's a risk. And once we can understand that, then hopefully what that does is that begins to motivate us that much more to want to show the kind of love that God has for us. So you can see this on the screen. Loving God enables us to see the brokenness, struggle, and hurt in others. Because there's this one point where Jesus, before he's crucified, he says this in Matthew chapter 22, verses 37 through 38. Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones God's messengers. How often I have wanted to gather your children together as a hen protects her chicks beneath her wings, but you wouldn't let me. And now look, your house is abandoned and desolate. So Jesus sees the current condition, but he also knows the condition that is coming. Because in AD 70, it's all gone. It's gone. So I think it's important for us if we can just begin, because that's where compassion starts. Compassion starts by being able to look around us and being able to see the level of brokenness and difficulty that people are going through and that they're struggling with. But going back to the story, it also says that the Jewish man was stripped and beaten and left half dead. And that part of the story is really important. Stripped and beaten and left half dead. It says in Luke chapter 10, verses 31 and 32, by chance, a priest came along. But when he saw the man lying there, he crossed to the other side of the road and passed him by. Verse 32, a temple assistant walked over, and looked at him lying there, but he also passed by on the other side. So these are two people that, if we were going to say good, right, these are two people that are supposed to be good. They're supposed to be good. And so you would think if someone is beaten on the ground, stripped, left half dead, that the priest would walk over, the priest, right, the servant of God, would walk over and see the guy and help the guy. But the priest is like, and walks across the street. And then it says the temple assistant. It says that he walked over. So the priest saw the guy like, oh, and just walked across the street. The temple assistant actually walked over and looked at the guy, then turned and walked across the street. It makes me think of, there was a movie that came out, I want to say the 80s or 90s. It was called I'm Gonna Get You Sucker. And there's this guy that is, he gets hit by a car, something like that, and he has a broken leg. And he goes, oh, my leg, oh, my leg. And so this person comes over and goes, what's wrong? He goes, my leg is broken. He goes, your leg is broken? He goes, yes. And the person goes, well, you won't need these shoes. And takes the guy's shoes, kind of thing. So that's kind of what this temple assistant does. Like, he sees the guy and is like, Now, let me tell you the reason why. It's because according to Levitical law, if you handled a dead body, then you were considered ceremonially unclean. And so here's what their fear was. Their fear was, if I help this guy and the guy dies, I am now ceremonially unclean, and so I have to go through a cleansing process, and that cleansing process will remove me from the opportunity of being able to do my priestly or my temple assistant duties. So here's what we learn from this, and this is really important for us to understand too. Here's what we can learn from these two guys. There's always a reason not to love. There's always a reason not to love. And the reality is, if we look for a reason not to love, we will find it. We will find there's always a reason not to love. There's always an excuse not to love. And also, it's easier to justify not loving. It's easier to justify not loving. So practice this kind of love, it does require us to be willing to do some soul searching for ourselves and in our lives and everything as well. But as we look at this, it's vital. So as Christians, we have to be very careful. If we are people who are followers of God, we have to be very careful about making sure that we are not pursuing or finding excuses for not demonstrating and not loving someone. Because there's always a reason, and it's easy to justify. Easy to justify. Now, I do want to say this. Yes, you do need to be wise. You do need to, if there is a drug addict asking you for money, it is not wise to hand them $1, right? It's just not. So you also have to practice wisdom. And maybe the best way to help that drug addict is to give to organizations that would help that drug addict, or volunteer organizations that would help that drug addict. So there's other ways to do it. So we do have to be wise, but I think it's very important for us to begin to realize that there's always a reason for us not to show love. And so we have to be willing to make the sacrifice and be willing to step out and be willing to show that. So the question that we have to ask ourselves is, what's my excuse? What's my excuse? I've walked out of the store before, and there's a person that's sitting there, and the person's like, hey, can you give me some money? As I'm walking out, I'm thinking, I got to get to church. I got meetings to get to. I got to get to, I start thinking about all the things I have to do. And then there's once where I was off of 190th. I'd gone to pick up a sign for the church that we had made. And I walk out of the place, and this person's asking for money, and I was like, I don't, And I get to my car, and all of a sudden, like, I feel like God is saying, I want you to go back. So I get up, I go back, but I don't give them money. So what I do is I go into the store, and I buy some food. And I walk out and I said, I have to be honest with you. I don't give out money because I want to make sure that I'm helping people who need it. So I give to organizations to help people who need it. However, here's some food. And that person was so grateful for the food. So there are, and again, I'll be honest, that's not patting myself on the back because I'll also be honest. There have been times where that person's been out there and I've gotten in my car and I've driven off. So I'm not perfect. So I want to make sure that's really clear too. Um, but there's always a reason for us to not show love. And so if there is a time where we have to err, if I have to err on not showing love or err on showing love, I think God would prefer for us to err on the side of showing love and serving others. But it goes on in Luke chapter 10, verse 33 to 34. It says, then a despised, there he goes, there goes that word again, a despised Samaritan came along. And when he saw the man, he felt what? Compassion for him. Going over to him, the Samaritan soothed his wounds with olive oil and wine and bandaged them. So I've always wondered, like, did he pour the wine over the sore, or did he like, here, bro, help yourself, kind of thing? Then he put the man on his own donkey, which means, so to put the man on his own donkey, that means now he is walking and the man is riding. And took him to the inn where he took care of him. And so this is important. So here's the point that I want us to understand. Love and compassion transcends what divides us and goes beyond all barriers. That's important for us to understand too. Love and compassion transcend what divides us and goes beyond all barriers. So, going back to the example of the KKK guy and the Black Panther guy, and Jesus telling a story, and then all of a sudden the KKK guy shows compassion to the Black Panther guy, or vice versa. That's kind of like the implications behind here. A person taking care of his vaunted and daunted enemy. And so, but it does. It goes beyond all barriers. And so, the idea behind this is looking at being able to love others, no matter what the challenge might be. And so, as we look at this, and it's important for us to understand too, when it comes to making a commitment to be compassionate, is this is unconditional love here. Because I think sometimes what we do is we get kindness and love confused. Helping people that like me, that's kindness. Supporting people that like me, that's kindness. But helping someone who doesn't like me, that's love. That's love. And so we get the two confused. I get the two confused sometimes. And so I think it's important for us to be willing to understand that. And so, I want to emphasize this, because when the Samaritan saw the Jewish man on the ground, what he didn't see a Jewish man. He saw a broken man. And so as a result of that, he was willing to do whatever it was to help him. And I think, one of the things that's difficult about love is to move beyond surface level love. Because on the surface, I could justify not loving the jerk because he's a jerk on the surface. I can justify not loving the whatever. I mean, we can go through the list, right? We can find a list of different ways that we can justify loving people. We can look at, the person who's greedy on the surface, the person who's selfish on the surface. We can look at all of those and begin to say, and it's easy to justify to not love that person because that person doesn't deserve the love that we feel like we're being called to give them. But what this passage and what this love is requiring us to do is to do the kind of love that Jesus does. And what is the kind of love that Jesus does? Jesus sees beyond the surface. Jesus loved me not for what was on my surface, because what was on my surface deserved to be rejected. What was on my surface was broken. What was on my surface was struggling. What was on my surface was addiction. I can go through the list of the things that were on my surface, but Jesus loved me anyway. He loved me anyway. And so I think the idea behind having compassion is to be able to see beyond the surface and be able to recognize one significant thing. Every single person is made in God's image. They're made in God's image. And so we serve the image bearer of God. We serve them. And so when we begin to understand that, it makes a significant difference as well. And here's the thing too, is the Samaritan was willing to take the risk. Because here's the thing, is what if I serve this guy? Like, what if he's on my donkey and he dies? What if he's on my donkey and he dies? So now what are the implications of that? What do I have to do with that? Find his family, bury the guy? Like, I mean, there's a whole slew of implications that now come with that. But the thing is he saw the brokenness of this guy and said, again, you are worth the risk. You're worth the risk. And that's what Jesus declares for us, ultimately, that we are worth the risk. It's an unconditional love that he offers to us. And so, what if I serve you and you reject me? You're worth the risk. What if I serve you and you turn back to the very thing that broke you? You are still worth the risk. What if I serve you and you question my motives? You are still worth the risk. That's what love says. Love says ultimately, you are worth the risk. So it goes on to say in Luke chapter 10, verse 35, it says, the next day he handed the innkeeper 2 silver coins, telling him, take care of this man. If his bill runs higher than this, I'll pay you the next time I'm here. So this is also vital to realize love costs us something. To demonstrate this kind of love, to love your neighbor, it costs us something. And I think one of the things I've seen, even in me, is I've seen it where we are willing to be loving until it costs us something. Like, yes, let's help the homeless. Let's do something for them. What, you want to build a shelter in my neighborhood? Right? We're willing to be loving until it costs us something. Let's help the people who are mentally ill because they need the help. But what that might mean costing more and paying more in my taxes? Let's help teenagers. Let's get them off the street. It is better for teenagers to be off the street on Halloween until they come to my house for trick-or-treating. And then aren't you too old to be trick-or-treating? Right? We do that kind of thing. So the challenge is, and this part's uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable to me as I wrote it, and as I thought about it in my own life, because there have been times where I have not loved, and I didn't love because I knew that there was a cost that was connected to it. So that's the challenge with this kind of love. And so what the Samaritan does is the Samaritan is willing to pay that cost because compassion also requires sacrifice. Jesus showed us in compassion, right? His compassion cost him the cross. And so it's that same element as well. So it goes on in Luke chapter 10, verse 36 and 37. It says, now which of these 3 would you say was a neighbor to the man who was attacked by bandits? Jesus asked. And the man replied, the one who showed mercy. Then Jesus said, yes, now go and do the same. Now go and do the same. So let's be people who show mercy, compassion, grace, love. Let's be people who make a commitment and do that. And the reason why we do that is because, again, we are motivated by this incredible love. So if Jesus gave me, who is undeserving, this love, then who am I not to give someone else who's undeserving that love as well? And someone said this, and I thought this was really, this really hit me. And they said, God using you may be the answer to someone else's prayer. God using you may be the answer to someone else's prayer. that love that speaks, that love that resounds. So again, here at Encounter, again, we're making a commitment to live according to the Great Commission, or the Great Commandment, I should say. And it's love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. And so again, here at Encounter, we sum that up with love up, love out, and love in. So in loving up, here's what I want to encourage us to do. Spend time with God and devote yourself to grasping the depth of his love for you. Spend time with him. Hang out with him. Connect with him. And allow his love to become more and more of reality in your life. Love out. Love and serve what is beneath the surface. Love and serve what is beneath the surface. Because you never know the love that you might do for that person, how it may change their heart. It could be the catalyst for incredible change. And I tell you, my wife is a model for that. I mean, she really is. She tells me stories about kids that she has an opportunity to be able to serve in her classroom, and just the challenges that they have at the beginning. And some of those kids are completely resistant to the love that she has for them in that classroom. But as she pours and pours and pours and pours and pours, by the end of the school year, for many of them, their lives change significantly because of it. It's just amazing to see what happens. And that really is an example of loving what's beneath the surface, because what's on the surface can be off-putting. I mean, it really can. And then love in. Discover the reasons that hinder you from being loving. Discover those reasons. Kind of explore that and find that out and figure that out. And then allow God to challenge us and kind of push us to love others. So love your neighbor. Father, I just thank you. I thank you because many times you have a vision for us that is greater than the vision that